The Millfield County Courthouse bustled with its usual Monday morning activity. Judges in flowing black robes swept through the corridors, lawyers clutched leather briefcases while consulting their phones, and anxious defendants waited on uncomfortable wooden benches. Among them sat Maribel Ochoa, a diminutive woman with silver-streaked hair pulled into a simple bun, wearing a modest floral dress that had seen better days. At 58, Maribel looked out of place among the power suits and legal professionals. Her calloused hands nervously twisted a worn handkerchief as she waited for her case to be called. To casual observers, she appeared to be another overwhelmed defendant facing the intimidating machinery of justice, but appearances could be deceiving. Judge Lowell Harrington presided over Courtroom 4B with the stern demeanor of someone who had heard every excuse in the legal lexicon. His piercing gaze surveyed the room like a hawk searching for prey as he adjusted his reading glasses. Docket number 47329, Ochoa versus Valtech Industries, announced the bailiff, a burly man with a voice that echoed through the high-ceilinged room. As Maribel approached the plaintiff's table alone, the defense side, filled with a team of 4 attorneys from Price and Durden, Valtech's prestigious legal firm. Lead counsel Dominic Wexler, with his tailored 3-piece suit and carefully maintained silver hair, didn't bother hiding his smirk. "Ms. Ochoa, are you representing yourself in this matter?" Judge Harrington asked, peering over his glasses with barely concealed impatience. "Yes, Your Honor," Maribel replied, her voice soft but steady. A few chuckles rippled through the courtroom. Judge Harrington frowned. "Ms. Ochoa, you're bringing a complex corporate liability case against Valtech Industries. Without legal representation, do you understand the challenges you're facing?" Before Maribel could answer, Wexler stood. "Your Honor, we move for immediate dismissal. Ms. Ochoa's complaint lacks merit and proper legal standing. This is clearly a frivolous lawsuit that wastes the court's valuable time." "I object, Your Honor," Maribel responded calmly. "Mr. Wexler hasn't provided any substantive grounds for dismissal, merely conclusory statements that don't address the actual merits of my complaint." The judge raised an eyebrow, surprised by her proper use of legal terminology. "Proceed, Ms. Ochoa." "Your Honor, my complaint meets all the requirements under State Civil Procedure Rule 8A. I've provided a short and plain statement showing I'm entitled to relief. Additionally, I've submitted evidence that Valtech's chemical disposal practices violated EPA regulations, resulting in groundwater contamination that destroyed my family's farm and orchard, our primary source of income for 3 generations. Wexler's smirk faded slightly. "Your Honor, Ms. Ochoa clearly found some legal language online, but this doesn't change the fact that she can't possibly navigate the complexities of environmental litigation without counsel." Judge Harrington looked contemplative. "Ms. Ochoa, while I appreciate your effort, Mr. Wexler raises a valid concern. These cases typically require expert witnesses, extensive discovery, and technical knowledge of environmental regulations." Maribel nodded politely. "I understand, Your Honor. That's why I've prepared a comprehensive litigation strategy, including a list of qualified expert witnesses willing to testify about the soil and water contamination and a detailed timeline of Valtech's regulatory violations over the past decade." As she methodically removed neatly organized folders from her worn canvas bag, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted perceptibly. The defense team exchanged concerned glances, while Judge Harrington's expression changed from dismissive to curious. No one had bothered to ask why this unassuming woman felt confident enough to face one of the state's most powerful corporations alone. They were about to find out. Maribel's hands no longer trembled as she presented her first exhibit, a bound document containing 20 years of soil and water testing from her property. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter this evidence showing the progressive contamination pattern that precisely correlates with Valtech's manufacturing schedule and waste disposal activities." Wexler jumped to his feet. "Objection. This is clearly inadmissible. Where did these tests come from? Who conducted them? This is precisely why pro-SE litigants shouldn't—" "I conducted them myself," Maribel interrupted calmly. "I hold a Ph.D. in environmental chemistry from Berkeley. and I've published 17 peer-reviewed papers on industrial contamination analysis. Before I inherited my family's farm, I worked for the EPA for 12 years as a senior environmental scientist. A stunned silence fell over the courtroom. Judge Harrington leaned forward. "And you can authenticate these test results, Dr. Ochoa?" "Yes. Your Honor, I've maintained detailed records including control samples, and I've had independent laboratories verify my findings." She slid another folder forward. "These confirmatory tests were conducted by Westfield Environmental Sciences, whose certification and credentials are included in the appendix." The defense team huddled together, furiously whispering as they flipped through their documents. Wexler's confident demeanor had evaporated entirely. "Furthermore," Maribel continued, "I've included satellite imagery showing the progression of vegetation die-off on my property, spreading outward from the boundary shared with Valtech's facility. The pattern is consistent with subsurface migration of the specific chemicals used in Valtech's manufacturing process." Judge Harrington examined the images with newfound interest. "These are quite compelling, Dr. Ochoa." "Thank you, Your Honor. I've also prepared a motion to compel Valtech to release their internal water testing data from 2015 to present. Their own environmental compliance officer, Renata Davenport, documented concerns about improper disposal procedures, but was instructed to conceal these findings." Wexler turned pale. "Your Honor, these are unfounded allegations. Ms. Davenport's employment records are confidential." Maribel smiled slightly. "Ms. Davenport contacted me directly after seeing my complaint filing. She's willing to testify about the falsified environmental compliance reports. I've submitted her sworn affidavit. Exhibit C." The defense team erupted into frantic whispers. One junior attorney hurriedly left the courtroom, phone pressed to his ear. Judge Harrington's expression had completely transformed from condescension to respect. "Dr. Ochoa, why did you choose to represent yourself rather than hire counsel?" Maribel straightened her shoulders. "3 law firms refused my case after receiving pressure from Valtech. The 4th accepted, but suddenly withdrew, citing conflicts of interest after Valtech's parent company acquired their biggest client. I decided that perhaps the best way to fight for justice was to do it myself." Judge Harrington nodded thoughtfully. "I see. Additionally, Your Honor," Maribel continued, "I've filed a motion for preliminary injunction to halt Valtech's operations until they implement proper containment measures. Their continued chemical leaching threatens not just my property but the county's primary aquifer, which provides drinking water to over 30,000 residents." As Maribel methodically laid out her case, the courtroom spectators, initially amused by the sight of this unassuming woman facing off against corporate giants, now watched in awe as she delivered an expert legal presentation backed by scientific evidence that even the most seasoned environmental attorneys would admire. Judge Harrington checked the time. "We'll take a 15-minute recess. I suggest the defense use this time to reconsider their position." When court reconvened, the defense table had undergone a transformation. Joining Wexler was Valtech's silver-haired CEO, Randall Thurmond, flanked by the company's chief legal officer. The atmosphere had shifted dramatically, the earlier mockery replaced by tense respect. "Your Honor," Wexler began, his voice notably less confident, "after reviewing Dr. Ochoa's evidence, Valtech would like to discuss the possibility of settlement negotiations." Judge Harrington turned to Maribel. "Dr. Ochoa, are you amenable to settlement discussions?" Maribel's expression remained composed. "I'm open to hearing their proposal, Your Honor, but I have specific non-negotiable terms regarding remediation of the environmental damage." The judge nodded. "Let's proceed with the hearing while your terms are being considered. Continue with your presentation, Dr. Ochoa." Maribel activated a tablet, connecting it to the courtroom's display system. "I'd like to present evidence regarding the specific chemicals at issue and their movement through the soil into groundwater." What followed was a masterclass in both environmental science and legal argument. Using 3-dimensional modeling, Maribel demonstrated how Valtech's improperly disposed chemicals had created a contamination plume, affecting not just her property, but potentially the region's entire water supply. This model was created using industry-standard hydrogeological software, she explained. I've included the raw data sets and methodology in my filing. Most importantly, the contamination signature contains proprietary stabilizers, only used in Valtech's manufacturing process. Compounds. They patented in 2017. Wexler leaned forward. Objection, Your Honor. Dr. Ochoa couldn't possibly have information about proprietary chemical formulations. Actually, Maribel replied, Valtech published the basic molecular structure in their patent application, which is public record. I simply compared that structure to the compounds I isolated in my soil samples. They match perfectly. During questioning, Maribel revealed that her seeming overnight expertise in law was anything but improvised. Following the death of her husband, 3 years earlier, she had audited law courses at the state university while continuing to run the farm, focusing specifically on environmental law and civil procedure. Your Honor, she continued, I'd like to address the legal precedent established in Harmon versus Industrial Chemical Processing, which the defense will likely cite. While superficially similar, that case is distinguishable because Harmon failed to establish a clear chain of causation. As my evidence demonstrates, the chemical signature here is uniquely traceable to Valtech. Judge Harrington nodded approvingly. You've clearly done your homework, Dr. Ochoa. Additionally, Maribel continued, I've prepared a comprehensive remediation plan developed in consultation with environmental engineers. The estimated cost to fully restore the affected soil and groundwater is $12.7 million over 5 years, a figure that's actually conservative given the extent of the damage. As she spoke, Thurmond whispered urgently to his legal team. The courtroom, now packed as word spread about the remarkable proceedings, watched as this unassuming woman systematically dismantled a corporate giant's defenses. Finally, Your Honor, Maribel said, I'd like to present evidence that Valtech was aware of the contamination as early as 2018, but continued operations without implementing recommended containment measures. This establishes not just negligence, but deliberate indifference to environmental harm. She produced internal company emails obtained through preliminary discovery that showed executives dismissing environmental concerns as acceptable risks given the cost of proper remediation. Systems. Wexler stood up hastily. Your Honor, we request a brief recess to confer with our client. Judge Harrington checked his watch. Granted, we'll reconvene in 30 minutes. When the court reconvened, tension hung thick in the air. The defense table had rearranged itself yet again, with additional attorneys and executives now present. Maribel sat alone, reviewing her notes with steady hands and clear eyes. Your Honor, Wexler began, Valtech Industries would like to propose a settlement offer of $2 million to Dr. Ochoa, with an additional fund of $3 million established for potential remediation efforts. Before Judge Harrington could respond, Maribel stood. Your Honor, I must respectfully decline this offer. It significantly undervalues both the damage to my property and the cost of proper environmental remediation. Furthermore, it makes no provision for the other affected properties in the area. She smoothly transitioned into her next argument, pulling up county property maps on the courtroom display. These highlighted areas represent 27 additional properties potentially affected by the contamination plume. I've conducted preliminary testing on 8 of them with the owner's permission. All show similar contamination patterns. A murmur swept through the courtroom. Judge Harrington leaned forward. Dr. Ochoa, are you suggesting this should be a class action? Yes, Your Honor. I've already filed the paperwork to certify a class of affected property owners. While I've been prepared to litigate my individual case, justice would be better served by addressing the full scope of the damage. Valtech's CEO whispered urgently to Wexler, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. Furthermore, Maribel continued, I've engaged with the state's Environmental Protection Department, which has agreed to conduct independent verification of my findings. Their preliminary assessment supports my conclusion that this contamination constitutes a significant public health risk. She produced a letter on official state letterhead. The department has indicated they're considering separate regulatory action against Valtech based on my evidence. The defense team looked stricken. What had begun as a seemingly simple case against an unsophisticated plaintiff had evolved into potential regulatory action and class litigation that could cost tens of millions. During cross-examination, Wexler attempted to undermine Maribel's credibility by questioning her testing methods, but she calmly demonstrated her adherence to EPA protocols and industry best practices. Dr. Ochoa, Wexler asked, clearly attempting to find any weakness, how can you possibly have time to run a farm, conduct these tests, and master complex legal procedures? Maribel's eyes flashed. Mr. Wexler, when your livelihood and heritage are being destroyed, you find the time. My family has worked that land for 3 generations. When I realized what was happening to our soil, our water, our future, I made it my mission to understand exactly what was killing our farm and how to hold those responsible accountable. Her quiet dignity silenced the courtroom. Even Wexler seemed momentarily chastened. Judge Harrington intervened. I think we've established Dr. Ochoa's qualifications and commitment. Let's move to the specifics of the remediation plan. For the next hour, Maribel outlined a comprehensive approach to containing and reversing the contamination, drawing on cutting-edge environmental restoration techniques. Her plan included phytoremediation using specific plants to extract toxins, targeted soil replacement, groundwater filtering systems, and regular monitoring. The beauty of this approach, she explained, is that it would allow affected property owners to eventually return their land to productive use, rather than simply containing the damage. As the day's proceedings drew to a close, Judge Harrington addressed both parties. I've rarely seen evidence presented with such clarity and thoroughness. Dr. Ochoa, your preparation is commendable. I'm taking your motion for preliminary injunction under advisement, and will rule tomorrow morning. Looking directly at Valtech's team, he added, I strongly suggest the defendants reconsider their settlement position before we reconvene. The following morning, the courtroom was standing room only. News of the remarkable David versus Goliath battle had spread throughout the legal community and beyond. Local media crowded outside the courthouse, eager for updates on the unassuming farm owner who had outmaneuvered a corporate legal team. Maribel arrived early, as composed as ever in her simple attire, a stark contrast to the expensive suits surrounding her. She nodded politely to several property owners who had come to support her, after learning they too might be affected by the contamination. When Judge Harrington entered, the room fell silent. Before I rule on the preliminary injunction, I understand. Valtech has a statement. Wexler stood, accompanied by CEO Thurmond. Your Honor, after careful consideration of Dr. Ochoa's evidence and claims, Valtech Industries would like to propose a comprehensive settlement. The terms they outlined represented a complete reversal from the previous day's dismissive offer. $15 million for remediation efforts, $7 million in damages to affected property owners, implementation of Maribel's proposed cleanup plan under independent oversight, and most significantly, a public acknowledgement of responsibility. Additionally, Thurmond himself added, stepping forward, Valtech commits to establishing a $10 million environmental stewardship fund for long-term monitoring and protection of the region's water resources. Judge Harrington turned to Maribel. Dr. Ochoa, these terms appear to address your primary concerns. What is your response? Maribel stood, her posture straight and dignified. I appreciate Valtech's revised offer, Your Honor. However, I would request 2 additional provisions. First, that affected property owners receive relocation assistance during the most intensive remediation periods. And second, that Valtech implement new waste management protocols designed to prevent similar incidents at all their facilities nationwide. Thurmond nodded almost immediately. We accept these additional terms. Judge Harrington smiled slightly. Very well. I'll retain jurisdiction to ensure the settlement terms are properly executed. Dr. Ochoa, I must commend your extraordinary preparation and presentation. You've represented yourself with exceptional skill." "Thank you, Your Honor," Maribel replied. "Sometimes the most effective advocate is the one with the most at stake." As the proceedings concluded, attorneys from several prestigious environmental law firms approached Maribel, offering their cards and congratulations. A group of other property owners gathered around her, expressing their gratitude through tearful hugs and handshakes. Outside the courthouse, as reporters clamored for comments, District Attorney Veronica Lawson approached Maribel. "Dr. Ochoa, I was in the courtroom yesterday. My office would like to consult with you on similar environmental cases we're investigating. Your expertise would be invaluable." Maribel smiled thoughtfully. "I'd be happy to help, but my priority is restoring our land. Perhaps once the remediation is underway." 6 months later, as the first phase of cleanup transformed her once dying fields into a pioneering site for environmental restoration techniques, Maribel established the Ochoa Environmental Justice Center in a renovated barn on her property. There, she began training others, particularly rural property owners and farmers, in basic environmental testing and legal advocacy. The center quickly became a national model, with Maribel traveling to communities across the country facing similar corporate contamination issues. Her approach, combining rigorous science, meticulous legal preparation, and quiet determination, inspired countless others to stand up against environmental injustice. What began as a seemingly hopeless battle by one simple farm owner against a powerful corporation had transformed into a movement, and in courtrooms and corporate boardrooms nationwide, the name Maribel Ochoa now commanded immediate respect, a powerful reminder that true legal brilliance sometimes came in the most unexpected packages. The orchard on her family land, once withering from chemical poisoning, now bloomed again. Standing among the young trees one evening, Maribel thought about her journey from scientist to farmer to reluctant legal advocate. She had never sought the spotlight, only justice. But in finding her voice to defend her land, she had helped countless others find theirs as well. And that, she reflected as the sun set over her healing fields, was the most satisfying victory of all.